John records a death and resurrection just shortly before Jesus' arrest and crucifixion. He says, when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she told him. "I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who has come into the world." And after she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and he is asking for you." When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could he not, the one who not opened the eyes of the blind men, have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and his feet wrapped in strips of linen and a cloth around his face, and Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." A woman looked out her window one morning and saw a German shepherd shaking the life out of the neighbor's rabbit. Her family did not get along very well with these neighbors, so this was going to be an even bigger disaster. She grabbed a broom, pummeled the dog until it dropped the rabbit, extremely dead now, and she panicked. She did not know what else to do, so she grabbed the rabbit, took it inside, gave it a bath, blow-dried its original fluffiness, combed it until the rabbit was looking really good, almost like it was alive, snuck it into the neighbor's yard, and propped it back up in its cage. An hour later, she hears these horrific screams coming from next door. She asked her neighbor, "Well, what's going on?" Our rabbit, our neighbor cried. "He died 2 weeks ago. We buried him and now he's back." They didn't know whether to be scared to death or to celebrate. Well, in time, it would be obvious there would be no breath, no movement, no life. Because what usually is dead, buried, and gone is dead, buried, and gone. And that's how it looked with Lazarus. Dead, buried, gone forever. And then there's a problem with Jesus. He doesn't seem to show up in time. He's alive just miles away, but late. It appears to be too late. When it comes to what we expect in life, God often seems to us like he's a day late and a dollar short. We think he's going to act in certain ways and at certain times and bring about certain results. But when it comes to God, the only certainty is God. What he does and how he does it usually catches us by surprise. And sometimes it seems to us that God is nowhere to be found. You know, everything's sort of dead in the water, or in this case, dead in the tomb. And nothing is going to change it. In fact, the only one who can change things in situations like that is God. Why didn't Jesus show up when he heard Lazarus was sick instead of waiting 4 days after the man was dead? This is what he said when he heard that Lazarus was sick. This is what he said to his disciples. This sickness will not end in death. Well, Jesus, it looks like you were mistaken about that, because Lazarus did die. But Jesus never said Lazarus wouldn't die. He just said the sickness will not end in death. But then later Jesus said to his disciples, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. Where death is at work, that's where Jesus does his best work. In fact, that is why we celebrate Easter. Jesus did his best work for you, his greatest miracle on Easter morning. Resurrection to new life. When somebody gets healed of a dreaded disease, that makes some believers, but even a lot of skeptics, say things like, well, maybe he was sick to begin with. Or she must have been faking it, like the kid who wants to stay home from school on Monday morning. But there's a qualitative difference, wouldn't you say, between being sick and being dead. Sick brings at least the hope of recovery. Dead means no hope at all, unless God is involved. You've heard stories about how dead people have come back to life. Some of them claim to have been to heaven, even seen Jesus, and then come back. And I've looked into some of these stories, and they're pretty hard to refute. Others revived on the medical examiner's table after their death certificate had already been filled out. Years ago, before embalming took place, there's evidence that some got their breath back after they had been buried. And so now we embalm bodies to not only preserve them, but to make sure that once you're dead, well, you're dead for good. Reminds me of a story President Harry Truman told. He said a man was hit on his head at work. The blow was so severe that he was knocked unconscious for an extremely extended period of time. His family, convinced that he was dead, called the funeral home and asked the local undertaker to pick him up at the hospital, which he did. Early the following morning, the dear man suddenly woke up and sat straight up in his casket. Confused, he blinked several times and looked around, trying to put the whole thing together in his mind. He thought, if I'm alive, what am I doing in this soft satin-filled box? And if I'm dead, why do I have this urgent need to go to the bathroom? Do you know whether you're spiritually alive or dead? Lazarus is dead. How can we be sure of that? Well, when Jesus shows up and asks for the tomb to be open, Martha says, he's been there, Lord, for 4 days. 4 days at that time meant something very specific. It meant that Lazarus was really dead. According to Jewish beliefs, the soul stayed near the body for 3 days. After that, there was no hope for resuscitation. The guy was dead. If you wonder why Jesus was in the tomb for 3 days, well, there you go. After 4 days, there's no hope for a dead person. At least that was the belief. That is, until Jesus comes on the scene. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. His body is beginning to decompose, as the women seem to allude to. His body stinks to the highest heaven. There's not even the slightest chance of a deathbed reversal. It's just over. Only a miracle can make Lazarus alive again. God's greatest work in your life happens when you need a miracle. The greatest miracle of all is resurrection. Resurrection to new life. There was no doubt that Lazarus was dead. When Jesus raised him from the dead, there would be little doubt about who Jesus was if people were, seriously taking what was happening. Jesus had told his disciples, and now he tells the crowd who had gathered in front of Lazarus' tomb, I'm doing this so that you might see God and his glory at work in me. And just after calling Lazarus out of the tomb, Jesus prays to the Father and says, I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, there were still skeptics. There will always be skeptics. People who believe maybe you performed some kind of parlor trick, or you simply refuse to give God credit for anything. You see something and it has to be God, but you refuse to admit it. However, John says, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him. It went beyond saying, I believe Jesus is a great teacher and a good healer. They put their faith in him. They put their complete trust in him as the only person who could save them from something as horrible as death. What is the one miracle that everybody is looking for? The one that keeps you from the reality of death and the end of life here. Dying itself could be bad enough. The older you get, the more you wonder about how you're going to die. Then there's the uncertainty about what, if anything, comes next, at least in the minds of many people. There are people who come back and report what it's like. But there's only one person who ever conquered death, and that's Jesus Christ. He not only conquered death, he helps you conquer the fear of death. There's another miracle everybody searches for, and that's how to really live. How to be alive in this life. How to enjoy and experience life to the full, for all it was meant to be. And so here's really the good news of Easter. Jesus came to conquer both life and death. He came so that death and the fear of death could be defeated in your life. He came so that you could live the fullest life possible in him. The life you were meant to live. A life with God. He came so that you could experience something even better after you're dead. Be fully alive with him forever in eternity. Lazarus is 4 days dead in the tomb and he stinks. Do you know that that's how we started sending flowers when people die? It wasn't just to show our sympathies to the family. It was the only way to cover up the smell of a dead body. That's why Abraham Lincoln's dead body was surrounded by flowers for its 2-week trip through several states to come back here to Springfield for his funeral in May of 1865. The biggest worries of those who tended to Lincoln's body was the fear of the smell and the decomposition. So it's sort of ironic we're a few weeks away from the anniversary of Lincoln's funeral that today we're celebrating life. That's because apart from Jesus Christ, your most celebrated day is your funeral. And you won't even be there. Without Jesus in our lives, we're all dead and lifeless. We're all like Lazarus. What we see here in Lazarus is our true condition, dead and wrapped up in our sin. There's no hope for us and we can't escape it. As Martha put it when Jesus asked for the tomb to be open, but Lord, he smells. And that's your life without God. It stinks. And everything about it seems to be slowly decaying. Bruce Willis starred in the movie The Sixth Sense. Your sixth sense tells you that something is really wrong in this world and in your life, but you just don't know what to do about it. The pivotal moment in the movie is when a little kid says to the Bruce Willis character, "I see dead people." And these dead people that he sees, they don't know that they're dead. The twist in the movie comes at the end when Bruce Willis realizes that he's one of the dead people. The whole time he didn't know it. He didn't realize that he was dead too. Has that awakening happened in your life yet? Have you faced the stench of sin and death at work in you? The emptiness of the tomb in your life? Are you going to go all the way to the end of your life before you accept that you are a dead man or dead woman walking and that you need help? Death is the result of sin. Sin is like a poison that is slowly taking your life. At first you don't notice it so much, but the longer you live and the longer you go through life in sin, the more it takes its toll on you. The more you sin, the more life moves towards disorder and decay. Sin will eventually cost you your life. Sin will tie you up and land you in a tomb with no way out. Do you realize your dead condition without God? Do you feel the pull and pain of a heart that is just refusing to make room for Him? Lazarus can't help himself. There's nothing he can do to stop the decay in his life. There's nothing in this world that can solve being dead. Only God can do something about it. The miracle of Lazarus' resurrection is Jesus helping us to see that apart from Him, we have no hope, no life, no future. Easter, however, changes all of that. Lazarus' miracle foreshadows Jesus' resurrection, but it also foreshadows what God wants to do in your life. Jesus didn't come to make you good or everything in your life just great. He came to give you life and to help you come alive. When you personally accept the miracle of what Jesus did on Easter, that's when you can start experiencing the greatest miracles He has planned for you. You don't really begin to live until you let Jesus resurrect you to new life. So what's tearing your heart up today? What makes you cry? What's the sorrow in your heart? You may not be crying on the outside, but you're crying on the inside where nobody else sees but God. Other people might see death at work in you, but only you really feel death at work in you. In the darkness, in the tomb where nobody else can be and nobody else can see, you feel alone, unheard, uncared for, trapped, no way out. There's a picture about God here that we need to see. When you feel dead inside, it's hard to believe that anybody else knows or cares. If you're going to come to Jesus for life, you have to believe that He cares about you and your life right now the way that it is. That is why the shortest verse in the Bible is one of the most important verses in the Bible. Jesus wept. God cares about what sin and death have done to you. That's why Jesus came in the first place. That's why He stands in front of the dead places in your life, ready to lead you out, ready to resurrect you to something better than you've ever known before. He weeps for you and for what has happened to you. But He is here. He's right here, calling out your name, calling for you to come to Him, calling you out of the tomb into the miracle He wants to do in your life. Your situation might seem impossible to you. You can't see your way through. You can't reverse what has happened. But you can have the faith of Martha when she said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus, my life hasn't gone the way I hoped or expected it would. But even now, you can still do the impossible. A few verses later, Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Do you know who he is? Do you know what kind of power he has? Will you put your complete trust in him? This is how the greatest miracles and the greatest life you could ever have, regardless of what's happened to you, are still possible. Unless you're willing to exercise that kind of faith in him, all this resurrection talk this morning is pointless. A minister was in Italy, and there he saw the grave of a man who had died centuries before, who was an unbeliever and was completely against Christianity, but he was a little afraid of it too. So this man, when he died, before he died, he had this huge slab put over his grave so that he wouldn't have to be raised from the dead in case there was a resurrection from the dead, in case it actually happened. He had insignias put all over the slab saying, I do not want to be raised from the dead. I don't believe in it. Evidently, when he was buried, an acorn must have fallen into the grave. So 100 years later, this acorn had grown up through the grave, split the slab, and now it was a towering oak tree. The minister looked at it and said, and asked himself, if an acorn, which has the power of biological life in it, can split the slab of this magnitude, what can the acorn of God's resurrection power do in a person's life? The only way you'll ever find out is by putting your trust in him. John Ortberg tells about being on vacation with his family at a hotel with a swimming pool. His two daughters, Laura and Mallory, were ages 5 and 3 at the time. John was standing in the pool and they were taking turns jumping into him. He had warned them both. He said, don't run around the pool. If you run, you could slip and fall in, and if you do that, you might drown. That would be really bad. I don't want you to drown. Well, at one point, while Laura was jumping in and John catching her, Mallory slipped and fell into the water. She went all the way to the bottom for a few seconds before John saw her and pulled her out. When he got her out of the water, she was sobbing. She looked at him with her big brown eyes and said, "Oh, Daddy, I drowned. I drowned." John said, "No, Mallory, you didn't drown at all. That's not drowning. You didn't even come close to drowning. You weren't even within a mile of drowning. So let's not tell Mommy about this. Mommy wouldn't understand what I know, which is that your father was watching you the whole time. And in that moment when you slipped under the water that was so scary, my arms were right there for you, and they were plenty strong to pull you out of the water. You are perfectly safe, Mallory, more alive than ever." You see, that's Jesus sort of speaking to you today. He doesn't want you to drown. He sees that you're slipping under, but he puts his arms right there, plenty strong to pull you right up. You're perfectly safe with him by putting your trust in him. You can be more alive than ever. Not only now, but even beyond death in eternity. This is how C.S. Lewis describes our future resurrected life in eternity after a lifetime of transformation. This is what we will look like when we are more alive than ever. Lewis says, if we let him, Jesus, we can prevent him if we choose, but he will make the feeblest and filthy of us into a god or goddess, a dazzling, radiant, immortal creature, pulsating all through with such energy and joy and wisdom and love as we cannot imagine. A bright, stainless mirror, which reflects back to God perfectly, though of course on a smaller scale, his boundless power and delight and goodness. The process will be long and in parts painful, but that is what we are in for, nothing less. he meant what he said. It's not enough to hear Jesus calling you out of your tomb today. You've got to step out of the tomb. A woman shared how she spent a great deal of her life living far from God. Feeling she needed more information about God before she could put her trust in him, she spent a year studying about God and asking all kinds of questions. About that time, she realized that her issue was no longer a lack of information. She had commitment issues. That was the issue. She knew that if she really put her trust in God, that fact that Jesus was resurrected would have to change everything else in her life. So here's what she did. She went home and she stood in her kitchen, staring at the threshold between her kitchen and the living room. Then aloud she said, "God, when I step across that line, I want you to know that I'm leaving my old life behind. I'm leaving behind my old sin. I want to be forgiven. I want to be your child. I want Jesus to be my forgiver, my friend, and my leader." And then she walked across the line. She said, "That is the biggest step I've ever taken in life because I'm entered into this relationship with God. Now when I have problems or questions or doubts, I remember that line. I remember that step. I remember that he is with me, that he is in me." She remembers to put her trust completely in the one who has the power to give her a new life. Have you ever taken that step? Is there somewhere in your life today where you need to reach out to the arm that is already reaching out to you, ready to do the impossible in your life? Phil Calloway says that one sleepy Sunday afternoon, when his son was 5, they drove by a cemetery. His son noticed a large pile of dirt by a newly excavated grave. His son pointed and said, "Look, Dad, one got out." Today we celebrate the life of the one who got out. It also celebrates the day that he got you out. Jesus is calling you out of your tomb. Will you trust him and step out into a resurrected life in him? Father, thank you for what we celebrate this Easter and really celebrate every Sunday is you, your resurrection from the dead, and our resurrection into new life. I pray for anyone who may be hearing these words today that their hearts would be open, just like that tomb was open, to allow you to come in and save them from life, to really begin to live now and forever in you. Thank you, Lord Jesus, for coming for us. We praise you, we worship you, we give our lives to you. In your name and for your glory we pray. Amen.